Oh, God knew I needed you. All of the plans I had, they never stood a chance. But I'm too
bone, but we don't know what that bone was. Like our bone, the neck bone, the leg bone. It was a bone, just a rib bone. It was in the back. Okay, so in the backyard, I didn't know there's no fence blocking out. So there is a fence blocking where that door is open, and that's where I saw those two rifles go in. And they told straight out, they told all of us, they wanted to go inside the house and do it. So I know it was them, but they went in the whole house. And that's why I wouldn't want to go in the house. Like, there's no way I would go inside. That's just creepy to me.
We're inside here.
We were right here for the guy kept trying to offer people tours.
It's ridiculous that people are going inside the fucking house. Yes, I seen you.
I didn't go in the house.
You went into the property.
I didn't go in the house.
Yes, and you were inside there.
We were right here because the guy kept trying to offer people tours.
The one that you guys
Then
get on.
why would you think that's okay? Why would you think
There's all
that's
kind of
physically
people
okay?
that are-
Mentally okay?
Yeah,
This is the place.
because I didn't go in their house, and you're telling people I went in their house.
Am I pointing at you? No.
You did a minute ago.
Yeah, you whoever I'm going like
Yeah,
this.
so you're
okay?
whatever can make a big mistake for me. So you should think about it.
Down the street. I'm sorry.
You making this ruckus out here is a disgrace.
You guys are acting like this as a fucking circus.
It's ridiculous that people are going inside the Harrow family's house. Yet, despite repeated warnings from law enforcement, curiosity has taken hold of the neighborhood. Cars pull over, people gather in small groups, and before long, some step onto the property, peeking through windows, pointing fingers, and whispering about what they think they know. Others shake their heads in disapproval, saying this invasion of privacy only makes things worse. Tensions rise as neighbors argue. Some accuse, some defend, each side fueled by anger and confusion. To some, the Harrows are grieving parents unjustly targeted. To others, they are liars hiding a dark secret. But behind all the shouting, the yelling, and the finger-pointing, one question hangs heavy in the air, a question no one can escape. What really happened to baby Emmanuel? The story begins with a chilling claim. A mother calls the police, frantic, saying her 7-month-old son was kidnapped in broad daylight. She paints a picture of panic, a baby ripped from her life, stolen by some shadowy figure while she fought to get help. The words kidnapping and abduction sent shockwaves through the community. Immediately, neighbors imagined masked intruders or dangerous strangers lurking around the block, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Parents clutched their children tighter. News vans parked on corners. For a moment, everyone believed this was the terrifying reality. A baby taken, a family shattered. But as the hours turned into days, and days stretched into weeks, investigators noticed something troubling. The story didn't add up. The timeline shifted. Details were murky. The accounts given by the parents contradicted one another. Evidence that should have been there simply wasn't. The police scoured nearby streets, searched homes, canvassed the neighborhood with flyers, even brought in dogs to track scents. Nothing. No sign of Emmanuel, no sign of a kidnapper, no trace of a crime scene pointing to abduction. Then came the announcement that shook everyone to their core. Investigators went on record saying they didn't believe Emmanuel was missing at all. They didn't think this was a kidnapping case. Instead, they believed something much darker. Emmanuel was dead. The baby, who the community had been searching for, praying for, and clinging to hope for, may never have been alive to be rescued in the first place. That revelation sent shockwaves through San Bernardino County. How could a mother call for help, crying that her child had been stolen, while police insisted the child was already gone? What had happened inside that house? And why did investigators feel so certain about their conclusion? The shift in narrative cracked the community in two. On one side were those who believed the Harrow parents were innocent, that they were being unfairly targeted by a system quick to point fingers at vulnerable families. Supporters argued that police had rushed to judgment without real proof. They said it was easier for authorities to blame the parents than to admit they couldn't track down a kidnapper. On the other side stood those who were convinced the parents knew more than they were saying. To them, the inconsistencies weren't mistakes, they were signs of guilt. And in the middle of it all was Emmanuel. A baby too young to crawl, too small to speak, too defenseless to protect himself. His name appeared on missing posters, his face printed across television screens, his story debated on social media threads late into the night. Everyone had a theory. Everyone had an opinion. But the truth remained buried beneath layers of secrecy, suspicion, and silence. As more details trickled out, the case only grew stranger. Investigators revealed that during searches of the Harrow home, they found items that suggested Emmanuel may never have left alive. They hinted at blood evidence, at inconsistencies in the parents' behavior, and at the possibility of foul play within the very walls that were supposed to keep him safe. It wasn't just about what was missing, it was about what was found. The home itself became a crime scene, a place where every object, every stain, every hidden corner could hold the answer to what happened. But the neighborhood couldn't wait for the official word. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said they heard screaming the day Emmanuel disappeared. Others swore they saw strange cars driving by. A few claimed they knew the parents well enough to say they could never do such a thing. Meanwhile, amateur sleuths and curious onlookers kept pushing their way onto the property, desperate to glimpse for themselves the house at the center of this nightmare. And that's what sparked the arguments now boiling over in the street. Some neighbors stood firm, saying, "We need to let the police do their job." Others shouted back, "We already know the truth, they did it." It became less about evidence and more about belief, less about facts and more about fear. Every day, emotions escalated. Every night, whispers grew darker. But through all the noise, Emmanuel's short life is the silent weight no one can ignore. 7 months old. A baby who should have been laughing, learning to sit, discovering the world for the first time. Instead, his existence is now defined by mystery, suspicion, and tragedy. Investigators insist this is not a story of a missing child waiting to be found. They believe Emmanuel's fate was sealed long before anyone dialed 911. And if they are right, then the entire narrative, the tearful pleas, the urgent searches, the cries of kidnapping, was nothing more than a cover for something unthinkable. The Harrows maintain their innocence. Their supporters demand patience. The police promise justice. But for now, the only thing certain is uncertainty. And the haunting question that keeps neighbors awake at night, that fuels endless debates online, and that lingers in every corner of that quiet street remains the same. What really happened to baby Emmanuel? In the past 24 hours, everything has changed. What was once whispered as rumor has now become headline-breaking fact. Both parents, 41-year-old Rebecca Harrow and 32-year-old Jake Harrow, are no longer standing in front of news cameras, no longer pleading for help or searching with neighbors. They are sitting inside a jail cell, arrested on suspicion of murder. The weight of those words is crushing. Murder. Not neglect. Not failure to protect. Murder. The charge that strips away every layer of doubt, leaving only one grim possibility, that baby Emmanuel never left his parents' care alive. From the inside of that jail, Rebecca still clings to her story. Through tears, she paints a vivid picture of the moment her world collapsed. She insists that she was in a parking lot, changing Emmanuel's diaper, when in a flash, her baby was taken from her. She describes herself screaming, running, begging strangers for help. She repeats the same desperate words, "I will not give up on my baby." It is the cry of a mother who wants to be believed, who wants the world to see her not as a monster, but as a victim. But detectives don't believe her. And their reasons go beyond suspicion alone. Investigators have tracked the story from beginning to end. They have combed through surveillance footage, analyzed timelines, searched the alleged crime scene, and interviewed witnesses who were there that day. Each layer stripped away reveals not confirmation, but contradiction. The parking lot where Rebecca said Emmanuel was taken? Investigators say cameras covering the area show nothing. No shadowy figure darting across the pavement. No frantic mother screaming for help. No abductor vanishing into thin air. Detectives claim there is no visual record of a kidnapping, only a void, a space where her story was supposed to unfold, but didn't. Even more troubling are the forensic details. Officers who entered the Harrow home in the days after the supposed kidnapping found evidence that pointed not to an abduction, but to violence. Though police have not revealed everything, they've hinted strongly that what they uncovered contradicted the parents' story entirely. Small traces of blood. Unexplained marks. Items that raise more questions than answers. Each discovery strengthens their case that baby Emmanuel never left that home alive. Still, the Harrows have not confessed. Rebecca continues to plead her case, portraying herself as a heartbroken mother stripped of her child and falsely accused by the very people who should be helping her. Jake, quieter but no less central, sits in silence, his every movement scrutinized by investigators who suspect he knows far more than he is saying. Together, they face the unimaginable, the possibility of spending the rest of their lives behind bars, accused of killing the very life they created. And yet, the division outside those jail walls only grows deeper. Supporters rally to Rebecca's defense, clinging to her words as if they are gospel. They argue that police are twisting facts to fit a narrative of guilt, ignoring the chance that Emmanuel really was stolen. To them, Rebecca's tears are not lies. They are the raw cries of a grieving mother fighting a battle against a system that wants a scapegoat. But for others, the performance has worn thin. They point to the lack of evidence of kidnapping, the inconsistencies in the parents' statements, and the physical signs inside the home. To them, the arrest is not shocking, it is long overdue. The public spectacle surrounding the case is unlike anything the neighborhood has ever seen. News vans line the streets. Commentators on television pick apart every frame of courtroom footage, analyzing the Harrow's body language, the cracks in their voices, the moments when tears come too quickly or not at all. On social media, strangers dissect every detail, debating whether Rebecca's statement from jail is heartfelt or rehearsed. In this storm of judgment, one truth remains. The only voice that cannot speak for itself is Emmanuel's. The irony is haunting. Rebecca's repeated vow, "I will not give up on my baby," echoes across headlines, but detectives argue the opposite, that the baby she claims to fight for is already gone, and that she knows why. For investigators, the case is not about finding Emmanuel alive. It's about proving what happened to him, when it happened, and who is responsible. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, every word spoken by the Harrows will now be scrutinized in court. Prosecutors will argue that the story of a diaper-changing abduction is nothing more than a desperate fabrication designed to cover up a crime. Defense attorneys will fight to dismantle the state's claims, insisting that without a body, there is no proof of death, and without proof of death, there can be no murder. The courtroom battle is set to be brutal, and Emmanuel's fate will hang in the balance of every argument. Meanwhile, the community is left paralyzed by a single, impossible question. Who do you believe? Do you believe the tearful mother behind bars, clinging to her last words of hope, insisting her child was stolen in the most vulnerable of moments? Or do you believe the detectives, seasoned investigators who say the evidence leaves no doubt that Emmanuel is gone, that the kidnapping story was a lie from the start? In the coming weeks, the case will unfold publicly, piece by piece, as the state builds its argument and the defense clause for doubt. But no matter which side emerges victorious, one devastating reality will not change. A baby who should have been learning to crawl, who should have been smiling in his crib, is no longer in the world. Whether stolen or slain, Emmanuel has become a symbol of tragedy. His story is now written in the ink of suspicion, in the shadow of grief, and in the fire of accusations. And as Rebecca sits in her cell repeating her vow, as Jake waits in silence, and as detectives prepare their case, one question refuses to fade. Was Emmanuel really stolen in that parking lot, or did the truth die with him inside the Harrow home? August 14th, Yucaipa, California. A scorching afternoon in a quiet suburban town suddenly explodes into chaos when a single phone call changes everything. The voice on the other end is trembling, frantic, almost incoherent. It's 41-year-old Rebecca Harrow. Through heavy breaths and broken cries, she tells the 911 operator she has been attacked in the parking lot of a popular sporting goods store. She claims she was blindsided, struck hard enough to knock her unconscious. And when she opened her eyes again, her nightmare began. Her 7-month-old son Emmanuel was gone. The operator tries to calm her, tries to collect the details. But the words come fast, scattered between sobs. "They took my baby. I don't know who it was. Please help me." For any parent, the thought of losing a child in the blink of an eye is horrifying. For the dispatcher, there's no time to waste. Law enforcement is immediately dispatched. Within minutes, the parking lot becomes a crime scene. Police vehicles screech into place, sirens blaring, lights flashing across the asphalt. Officers rush to secure the area, canvassing the store and surrounding businesses. Shoppers stop mid-step, staring as yellow tape begins to wrap around rows of parked cars. Store employees peek nervously from the windows, whispering about what they've just overheard. The word spreads quickly. A baby has been abducted. It doesn't take long before the case escalates. An Amber Alert is issued across California. Phones buzz statewide with the chilling message: abducted infant, Emmanuel Haro, 7 months old. For thousands of strangers, Emmanuel is no longer just a name. He is now the face of fear, a helpless child whose safety depends on whether the public sees something, anything, that might lead to him. The community responds in force. Within hours, volunteers mobilize. Parents leave work early. Students form search groups. Churches open their doors for coordination. Flyers are printed with Emmanuel's small, innocent face staring back at anyone willing to help. Social media lights up with his story, photos of the baby shared thousands of times, each click a desperate attempt to spread awareness. Hashtags trend, live streams begin, and soon Emmanuel's name is on the lips of people far beyond Yucaipa. Neighbors who never spoke to one another before now walk side by side, combing through streets, peeking into alleys, scanning parking lots. Cars pull over at random, their drivers convinced they've spotted something suspicious. Helicopters circle above, their floodlights sweeping through the neighborhoods as night falls. Every shadow feels like a threat. Every stranger's face looks like a potential suspect. For a community that prides itself on safety, the fear is suffocating. Parents clutch their children tighter, not letting them wander a single step away in grocery store aisles. Some refuse to let their kids play outside. The very idea that someone could snatch a baby in broad daylight, in the middle of a busy store parking lot, shakes everyone to their core. If it could happen to Emmanuel, it could happen to anyone. The Harrow family quickly becomes the focal point of attention. Rebecca's voice is broadcast on local news, replaying clips of her desperate cries, "I just want my baby back." She tells reporters about the terrifying attack, how she was struck and left unconscious, only to wake up in horror. To many, her tears are unbearable to watch, the pain of a mother robbed of her child. Candlelight vigils are organized in Emmanuel's name. Strangers bow their heads in prayer, holding candles that flicker in the warm August night. For a brief moment, the town is united, bound together by the shared hope of bringing Emmanuel home. But as the search intensifies, so do the questions. Police scour the sporting goods store's surveillance footage, hoping for even the slightest clue. A suspicious vehicle, a figure darting out of frame, anything. They interview employees, shoppers, and bystanders, reconstructing the scene minute by minute. What they expect to find is obvious. Some evidence of a struggle, a record of the attack Rebecca described, or at the very least, someone who saw something unusual. Instead, they find silence. No one recalls a frantic mother collapsing in the lot. No witness steps forward to say they saw a child being taken. And worse, the surveillance cameras don't seem to back up Rebecca's claims. Where she said she fell, investigators see nothing. Where she said the attacker came from, there is no one. Still, in those first 24 hours, the doubt remains hidden from the public. The Amber Alert dominates the headlines. Local TV stations run Emmanuel's photo on repeat, reporters standing live outside the Harrow home, the store parking lot, and police headquarters. The narrative is simple and heartbreaking. A mother was attacked, her baby stolen, and a community is rallying to bring him back. Every hour counts in a case like this. Experts say the first 24 to 48 hours after a child's disappearance are critical. Police know it. Volunteers know it. The public holds on to hope, desperately believing Emmanuel could still be found alive. But even as thousands search, some detectives are already beginning to wonder if the story matches the evidence. Is this really a case of a stranger kidnapping? Or is there something far darker beneath the surface, something that no Amber Alert could ever fix? And while the community continues to flood the streets with prayers, flyers, and hope, investigators begin quietly preparing for a very different kind of search. But when detectives sit down to review the store's security cameras, the first red flag appears. Frame by frame, angle by angle, the story begins to unravel. They expect to see a sudden commotion, a shadow darting between cars, or a frantic mother collapsing after being attacked. Instead, the footage is calm, almost mundane. People walk in and out of the store, cars come and go, the rhythm of an ordinary day. And then there's Rebecca, alone. No assailant rushing toward her. No stranger fleeing with a baby carrier. No car peeling out of the lot. Just Rebecca, standing, moving, waiting. The scene she described with such urgency over the 911 call simply doesn't exist. This discovery rattles investigators. A mother's account of a kidnapping, broadcast to the entire community, is now contradicted by cold, unflinching surveillance footage. The Amber Alert, the prayers, the frantic searches, all of it suddenly hangs in the balance. If the abduction didn't happen here, then where is Emmanuel? Detectives turn their attention to the Harrow home. From the outside, it looks like any other suburban house in Yucaipa, but once inside, the ordinary facade falls apart. Officers step carefully across the threshold, their eyes scanning every corner, their hands gloved as they begin a systematic search. What they uncover shocks even seasoned investigators. First, they notice what's missing. Essential baby items, a crib mattress, clothes, bottles, are nowhere to be found. These aren't things a stranger would take in a rushed abduction. These are deliberate removals, as if someone inside the house didn't want traces of Emmanuel to remain. Then come the photos. Family pictures that once hung proudly on the walls or sat neatly on shelves have been altered. Some are missing entirely. Others look as though images of Emmanuel have been deliberately cut out or replaced. It is as if someone tried to erase him from the narrative of the home. But the most disturbing discovery comes when investigators examine the floors. Certain boards have been ripped out, crudely pried open in a way that suggests something had been hidden or destroyed. Forensic teams move in, shining bright lights, dusting for evidence. That's when they find it. Small but undeniable. Blood. Tiny droplets, faint stains, the unmistakable trace of violence. Tests confirm what investigators already fear. It belongs to a child. The atmosphere inside the Harrow home shifts instantly. What began as a missing child investigation now carries the weight of something far darker. Detectives look at one another, the silence heavy in the room. These are not the signs of an outside abduction. No stranger would erase family photos, remove baby belongings, or tear apart floorboards. These discoveries suggest one thing, that the answer to Emmanuel's disappearance lies not in a parking lot, not with a faceless kidnapper, but within the very walls of his own home. Word of the findings spreads quickly within law enforcement circles, but for the public, the narrative hasn't caught up. Outside, neighbors continue to light candles, tape missing posters to light poles, and pray for Emmanuel's safe return. They don't yet know about the blood, the altered photographs, the ripped floorboards. They still believe there's a chance, still cling to the hope that the Amber Alert will bring Emmanuel back. But behind the scenes, detectives are already preparing to pivot. What they've uncovered doesn't point to a kidnapping. It points to a cover-up. The implications are chilling. If Rebecca fabricated the story of the parking lot attack, then she knowingly set an entire community into panic, a panic that diverted resources, time, and energy away from what police now suspect is the truth. If Emmanuel was harmed inside his home, then the cries of a desperate mother on that 911 call weren't cries for help. They were cries to distract, to mislead, to buy time. Investigators begin building their case carefully, methodically. Each missing item is cataloged, each altered photograph photographed, each trace of blood tested. They consult forensic experts, interview neighbors about anything unusual they may have heard in the days leading up to August 14th, and review phone records to piece together a precise timeline. Every detail matters, because if the kidnapping didn't happen, then someone in the Harrow family knows what really did. The haunting truth about cases like this is that homes often tell the story their occupants refuse to share. And in the Harrow home, the story written across the floors, the walls, and the shelves is one of silence, erasure, and violence. No stranger could explain away the missing baby items. No attacker could account for family photos deliberately changed. And no kidnapper would rip apart floorboards, leaving behind blood that whispers of a life cut short. With each discovery, the narrative shifts further from hope and closer to horror. For investigators, the conclusion becomes inescapable. Emmanuel was never taken from a parking lot. He was never stolen by a stranger. Something happened in his home, something no Amber Alert could ever prevent, something no prayer vigil could undo. And yet, the Harrows remain silent. Rebecca clings to her story of the parking lot abduction. Jake stays quiet, his role unclear but impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, detectives grow more certain that they are not searching for a missing child, they are building a murder case. Jake Harrow isn't a stranger to the law. Long before baby Emmanuel's disappearance gripped the community, Jake's name had already passed through the hands of judges, prosecutors, and police officers. His history is not that of a quiet, law-abiding parent but of a man repeatedly entangled in the justice system. And for many, the tragedy unfolding now feels less like an unforeseeable nightmare and more like a warning ignored. In 2023, the first major red flag appeared. Authorities revealed that Jake had pleaded guilty to a charge that made stomachs turn: willful child cruelty. The case involved an older child in his care, and the details were horrifying. Doctors confirmed that the child suffered multiple broken bones, injuries no one could reasonably explain away as accidents, bruises that didn't match the stories told, fractures that painted a picture of pain inflicted deliberately, not by chance. The evidence was strong enough that Jake admitted guilt. But in a move that still leaves many shaking their heads, Jake walked free. He was handed a suspended sentence, a legal reprieve that allowed him to avoid time behind bars as long as he stayed out of further trouble. In practice, it meant he could return home, resume life as though nothing had happened, and continue living under the same roof as Rebecca and her children. Critics now point to that decision as a turning point, a moment when the system could have intervened, but didn't. If Jake's history of cruelty had been met with stricter punishment, would baby Emmanuel still be alive today? The pattern didn't stop there. In 2024, just months before Emmanuel's disappearance, Jake was arrested again, this time on firearm-related charges. Though the specifics of the case were kept quiet, the mere fact that he was in possession of a weapon raised serious concerns. For someone already convicted of child cruelty, the idea of firearms in his orbit was alarming. Prosecutors flagged it. Police noted it. And yet, somehow, Jake managed to slip back into daily life once again. No lengthy prison term. No lasting separation from Rebecca or the children. Another chance handed back to a man with a history of violence and poor judgment. And so, by the time August 2024 rolled around, Jake was still living with Rebecca. Still in the same house where baby Emmanuel was supposed to grow up. Still in a position of authority and influence inside that family. Despite his record, despite the broken bones, despite the firearm charges, he remained present, woven into the daily rhythm of the Harrow household. And when this nightmare began, when Emmanuel's name became the center of an Amber Alert and a homicide investigation, Jake was right there at the heart of it. To detectives, Jake's history looms large. Criminal patterns often provide a blueprint for future behavior, and Jake's record suggests a man who has already crossed dangerous lines when it comes to children. The prior case of cruelty demonstrates a willingness to harm those most vulnerable. The firearm charges add another layer of volatility. For investigators, these aren't isolated mistakes. They are a trail of red flags, each pointing toward a capacity for violence. For the community, the revelation of Jake's past is infuriating. Parents who joined the search for Emmanuel now look back with anger, wondering how someone with such a record was allowed near children at all. On social media, outrage explodes. Commenters demand answers, blaming not just Jake but the legal system that repeatedly allowed him to walk free. If he was capable of hurting one child, one post reads, "Why was he trusted with another?" Others echo the sentiment, saying Emmanuel's case feels less like an isolated tragedy and more like the inevitable result of failures stacked one on top of another. Supporters of the Harrows, however, see things differently. Some argue that Jake's past doesn't prove guilt in Emmanuel's disappearance. They insist that while his record is troubling, it cannot explain what happened to the baby without concrete evidence. For them, the history raises questions but doesn't deliver answers. They cling to Rebecca's story of abduction, insisting that whatever Jake's flaws, they don't justify condemning him in a case where the facts remain cloudy. Still, for detectives, the context matters. When placed against the chilling discoveries inside the Harrow home, the missing baby items, the altered family photos, the blood beneath the floorboards, Jake's history begins to look less like coincidence and more like part of a larger, disturbing picture. His presence in Emmanuel's life, given his past, casts a shadow over every detail of the case. Was Emmanuel another child failed by the system, another innocent victim left in harm's way despite clear warnings? Or is Jake's past simply being used to strengthen suspicions in a case where certainty is still elusive? What is clear is this: when investigators look at Jake Harrow, they don't see an ordinary father caught in extraordinary circumstances. They see a man with a documented history of cruelty. They see someone who has already harmed children in his care. And now, with Emmanuel gone, they see a potential pattern that may have reached its most devastating conclusion. Despite all the red flags, despite the repeated arrests, despite the clear signs of danger, Jake was still there, living under the same roof as Rebecca, sharing responsibility for Emmanuel when this nightmare began. And now, as both parents sit behind bars, the haunting question echoes louder than ever. Was baby Emmanuel's fate sealed long before August 14th, the moment the courts allowed Jake to walk free? Rumors spread quickly in a case like this, each one adding another layer of suspicion, another crack in the fragile wall of trust between the Harrows and the community. One detail, whispered from person to person, soon dominates conversations in Yucaipa, that Rebecca herself had asked store employees about security cameras just days before her son vanished. The question alone is chilling. Why would a mother casually inquire about surveillance, unless she wanted to know where the blind spots were? Was she planning something all along? Was the story of being attacked in the parking lot part of a script written days in advance? Police haven't officially confirmed the rumor, but in the absence of answers, suspicions grow like wildfire. Some neighbors point to it as proof of premeditation, evidence that Rebecca orchestrated a cover story long before Emmanuel's disappearance. Others caution against jumping to conclusions, saying anyone could ask about cameras for ordinary reasons. But in the charged atmosphere surrounding the Harrow case, every detail, every whisper, feels weighted with sinister possibility. And while rumors swirl on the outside, detectives on the inside are piecing together facts that are far harder to dismiss. Forensics teams return to the Harrow home with advanced tools, combing over every inch. What they confirm is devastating. Blood. Small traces at first, hidden beneath ripped floorboards, faint stains on surfaces that someone tried to clean. Not the kind of mess left by a scrape or a cut, but blood that tells investigators a violent event occurred. The tests leave little doubt. It belongs to a child. The confirmation changes everything. The Amber Alert, once the beacon of hope for Emmanuel's safe return, now hangs in cruel contrast against the mounting evidence. Detectives are no longer asking, "Where is the baby?" They are asking, "Where is the body?" Their search expands. Another property tied to the family becomes the next focus of investigation. Officers swarm the location, digging through outbuildings, scanning the ground, searching for any clue that might lead to Emmanuel's remains. It is no longer about locating a missing child alive. It is about finding proof of death, and with it, answers to a crime more unthinkable than abduction. Cadaver dogs are brought in, their noses trained to detect even the faintest scent of human remains. The sight is haunting, dogs weaving through yards and rooms, handlers tense as they wait for signs of alert. These dogs are often the silent witnesses in homicide cases, their instincts pointing investigators toward the places human eyes and machines might miss. Each time a dog stiffens or sits, the tension spikes. Is this the moment Emmanuel's hidden resting place is found? For detectives, the pattern is undeniable. Every new discovery points further away from kidnapping, the story Rebecca clings to from her jail cell, and closer to murder. The parking lot incident, once the centerpiece of the case, now looks like a carefully crafted distraction. The blood inside the home, the missing baby items, the altered family photos, the suspicious second property, the cadaver dogs, together they form a narrative that leaves little room for strangers or random attacks. To the public, the shift is jarring. Only days earlier, neighbors marched through streets with Emmanuel's photo on flyers, believing they were helping search for a living child. Now, those same neighbors whisper about hidden evidence and cover-ups, struggling to process that their efforts may have been chasing a ghost. Vigils once filled with prayers of hope turned somber, candles burning for a life many now fear was taken long before anyone dialed 911. And yet, Rebecca refuses to bend. From jail, she continues to insist her baby was stolen in that parking lot. Jake says little, but his silence is deafening. For detectives, their words mean less than the evidence etched into the walls, the floors, and the ground. Every step forward hardens the suspicion that Emmanuel's disappearance was not the act of a mysterious kidnapper, but something far more chilling, a crime committed within his own family, hidden under layers of lies, and only now beginning to be uncovered. Outside the Harrow family home, the scene shifts from quiet mourning to a heartbreaking display of both sorrow and outrage. Teddy bears, balloons, and flowers pile up at the edge of the property line, each one left by a stranger who felt compelled to honor the life of a child they never met. Candles flicker late into the night, their flames bending in the warm California breeze, symbolizing a fragile hope that Emmanuel's story will not be forgotten. Prayer circles form on the sidewalks, voices rising in unison, asking for justice, for truth, and for peace for a baby who never had the chance to grow up. But as the hours pass, grief evolves into something heavier. The tears turn to questions, and the questions transform into anger. No child deserves this, one neighbor whispers through tears, her voice cracking as she lays down a single rose. Another community member, more outspoken, shouts into the crowd, if they did this to their own baby, then justice better be swift. The tension is thick. People who once felt united in hope now find themselves divided between sorrow for Emmanuel and outrage at the very parents who claimed to be victims. The Harrow family, once quietly known in their Yucaipa neighborhood, now find themselves infamous. The same house that neighbors used to walk past without a second thought is now a crime scene, sealed with yellow police tape, and guarded by deputies who ensure no one enters unauthorized. To many in the community, that house is no longer just a home, it's the place where Emmanuel's fate was sealed. Some whisper that it should be torn down, that no one should ever live there again. At vigils, the speeches carry undertones of betrayal. Parents in the crowd clutch their own children tighter, unable to comprehend how any mother or father could betray such an innocent bond. The once simple, heartbroken plea, "Bring baby Emmanuel home," has shifted into a heavier cry, "Justice for Emmanuel." The narrative is no longer about a missing child. It's about accountability, punishment, and making sense of a nightmare that has rattled the town to its core. Then, another twist. The Uvalde Foundation for Kids, a national nonprofit that initially lent its voice in solidarity, withdraws its support. This foundation had been one of the first organizations to amplify Emmanuel's story, pushing it across social media platforms and rallying volunteers to spread awareness. At first, they lit candles, they posted prayers, they urged the world not to look away. But after detectives revealed their mounting suspicions that Emmanuel was never kidnapped at all, that he may have been murdered, the foundation made a startling move. They issued what they called a symbolic blackout. Their website, once displaying Emmanuel's face with bold letters reading "Missing," went dark. Their social media pages, usually filled with pictures of children they advocated for, were replaced with solid black squares. The message was clear: they refused to spotlight the accused parents any longer. They would not lend their resources, their platform, or their credibility to people suspected of betraying their own child. For many in the community, This decision was devastating, but also understandable. Some supporters felt abandoned, like the foundation had turned its back on Emmanuel's memory. Others praised the move, saying it was a necessary line in the sand, a refusal to give any sympathy to those under suspicion. The foundation's leaders released a short statement. "We stand with children, not with those accused of harming them. Until justice is served, we will not continue public advocacy for this case in the same way." The backlash was immediate. On one side, families who had once lit candles alongside Rebecca felt betrayed, accusing her of using their compassion as a shield. On the other, longtime supporters of the Harrows argued that Rebecca was still innocent until proven guilty, that the foundation had acted too quickly, condemning a grieving mother before a jury ever did. Social media became a battleground, filled with hashtags demanding either justice for Emmanuel or justice for Rebecca. Meanwhile, the community itself fractured further. At the Holmes Memorial site, fights broke out. Some accused others of disrespecting the memory of Emmanuel by defending his parents. Others said the police were too quick to paint Rebecca and Jake as monsters. A simple row of candles and flowers, once a symbol of unity, now stood at the center of division. Through it all, Emmanuel's name continued to echo in prayers, headlines, and protests. His short life had become a rallying cry. His face, printed on posters and shared across phones, served as a reminder of both innocence lost and justice demanded. And while the investigation into his death deepened, the community wrestled with the same haunting thought. If the truth really is that his parents were responsible, then how do you begin to process a betrayal that deep? The Harrow home remained quiet, sealed off. But outside, every night, candles still burned. Each flame whispered the same desperate plea, that somehow, someday, the full truth of what happened to baby Emmanuel would finally be revealed. Detectives leading Jake Harrow in chains through a barren field was not just a procedural step, it was a moment that froze the community in collective horror. The image of a father, dressed in an orange jail uniform, being guided past patches of dry weeds and dirt under the scorching California sun, struck deep. Why this field in Moreno Valley, more than 20 miles away from where Rebecca claimed her baby was snatched? Police wouldn't confirm the purpose of the search, but their quiet, methodical scouring of the ground said enough. Shovels, drones, cadaver dogs, every tool was brought in. They were not searching for a missing stroller, a diaper bag, or a baby's pacifier. They were searching for human remains. For neighbors who had been holding on to the hope that Emmanuel was still alive, this moment felt like the collapse of that fragile belief. "If they're looking here," one woman whispered to reporters, "then they already know." And perhaps they did. Investigators rarely take such steps without a solid lead, and the fact that Jake himself was being marched into the field raised more questions. Was he showing them a place he had been before? Was this an effort to locate something only he could identify? Or were detectives playing psychological chess, hoping the sight of open land and shovels might push him toward a confession? At the same time, the spotlight swung back toward Rebecca. From day one, she had painted herself as a desperate mother blindsided by a random act of violence. She said she was attacked while changing Emmanuel's diaper in a parking lot, knocked out cold, and when she woke, her son was gone. It was the kind of story designed to trigger instant outrage and sympathy. Yet the cracks in her narrative formed almost immediately. Security footage revealed no attacker, no frantic mother stumbling after a fleeing car. Just Rebecca, alone, calm, methodical. And then came the whispers. Employees at the sporting goods store revealed she had asked about security cameras days earlier, as though testing the boundaries of what would or wouldn't be seen. Was this careful planning? A dry run for a cover-up? Police have never publicly confirmed these details, but in the absence of Emmanuel's safe return, speculation grew louder than silence. As both parents sat in jail, the public began dissecting their roles. Was Rebecca the mastermind, staging the kidnapping, feeding the media her tearful statements, trying to redirect suspicion toward an imaginary predator? Or was Jake the darker force, a man already convicted of child cruelty, arrested for firearms, capable of snapping under stress? Could this have been his doing, with Rebecca dragged into the spiral afterward? But perhaps the most haunting question is one that no one wants to ask aloud. Did Emmanuel ever leave that apartment alive after August 14th? Inside the Harrow home, investigators found a scene that contradicted every word of Rebecca's tale. Missing baby items, bloodstains, floorboards pried up as if someone was hiding or erasing evidence. Even altered family photos, as though an effort had been made to erase Emmanuel's existence from the walls that once displayed him. These were not the signs of a random kidnapping. These were the signs of an unraveling family secret. Neighbors, once eager to search, began pulling back. Candlelight vigils turned from prayers of hope to cries for justice. People left teddy bears and flowers, but behind the gifts was bitterness. Bitterness toward the parents now seen not as victims, but as suspects. The Uvalde Foundation for Kids, which had initially stepped in to advocate for Emmanuel's safe return, issued a public statement withdrawing support, symbolically blacking out Emmanuel's case until clarity emerged. Their decision reflected what many in the community felt. If the parents themselves were responsible, then the story wasn't one of abduction, but of betrayal. For law enforcement, the case is a puzzle with pieces soaked in grief and suspicion. They have blood evidence, behavioral red flags, and a timeline that doesn't match reality. What they don't have, at least not yet, is Emmanuel's body. And without that, Rebecca clings to her story, repeating from her jail cell, "I will not give up on my baby." But hope is dwindling. Every day that passes without Emmanuel being found tilts the scale further away from miracle recovery and closer toward tragedy. So the questions remain, gnawing at everyone who follows this case. Did Rebecca stage the kidnapping as a smokescreen for something more sinister? Was Jake involved directly? Or was he simply a man with a violent past now swept into a tragedy he couldn't prevent? Did Emmanuel die in that apartment, surrounded not by strangers but by the very people meant to protect him? Until the truth emerges, until Emmanuel is found, one terrifying reality hangs over this story. Somewhere out there, a 7-month-old baby's fate is still hidden. And until that fate is uncovered, fear will always walk hand in hand with hope. Investigators have said it bluntly, they do not believe baby Emmanuel is alive. But the absence of a body keeps the entire case suspended in a cruel limbo. For every parent, for every neighbor, for every stranger following this case online, that single gap, the missing body of a 7-month-old child, transforms grief into something even darker. Without remains, there is no burial. Without remains, there is no farewell. And without remains, there is no absolute proof that allows the mind to finally settle between hope and despair. The Harrow case has become an echo chamber of haunting uncertainty, and at the center of it all is one question that refuses to fade. Where is Emmanuel Haro? Detectives insist that their findings point not to abduction, but to foul play within the walls of the Harrow family's home. Blood traces, torn floorboards, altered photographs, evidence that suggests a violent incident, not a kidnapping. Yet when asked directly, they cannot give the community what it craves most, a definitive location for Emmanuel's tiny body. For investigators, this absence is not just heartbreaking, it is a massive legal hurdle. Prosecutors may have a strong circumstantial case, but without physical remains, every piece of evidence has to be argued twice as hard. Defense attorneys are already poised to point to that void, to say, if you cannot show the body, how can you prove a murder? For the extended Harrow family, the uncertainty eats away at them in public and private ways. Some relatives cling desperately to the possibility that Emmanuel is alive, taken somewhere else, hidden from view. Others accept the investigators' grim conclusion, but yearn for a body, for a burial, for the ability to look at a small grave and whisper goodbyes. They are trapped between dueling realities, a faint spark of hope and a mountain of grief. Community vigils often reflect this divide. Some candles are lit in the hope Emmanuel will come home. Others burn as a memorial for a life already lost. The contradiction hangs heavy in the air, night after night. Neighbors say the silence in Yucaipa feels oppressive now. Where there was once the sound of a baby crying through thin apartment walls, there is only quiet. That silence, to them, confirms the investigators' belief, Emmanuel never left alive. Yet the possibility of his body being hidden nearby keeps people restless. Parents do not let their children wander. Residents side-eye every wooded path, every vacant lot, every construction site. Could Emmanuel's remains be there? Is the truth lying just beyond sight? Law enforcement's search for Emmanuel has stretched into fields, canyons, and waterways. Cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, and drones have all been deployed. Each time officers cordon off a new area, like the eerie scene in Moreno Valley where Jake Harrow was escorted in shackles, speculation surges. Was this the place? Did detectives finally receive the lead that would put Emmanuel to rest? But so far, every effort has returned with no body, no discovery, no closure. It is as if Emmanuel has vanished into thin air, leaving only evidence of violence but none of presence. That is what makes this case uniquely agonizing, the cruel space between evidence and absence. The community has seen blood confirmed inside the apartment, heard of items removed or destroyed, and watched detectives carry evidence bags out of the Harrow home. They've seen parents arrested, charged with murder. And yet, when asked the simplest, most human question, where is Emmanuel? No one can answer. That lack of an answer gnaws at the public conscience. It fuels endless online debates, rumors, and conspiracy theories. Was the kidnapping staged to cover up a death? Did Jake dispose of Emmanuel while Rebecca crafted a story? Or was there some third explanation that no one yet sees? For investigators, that missing piece is more than symbolic. Without a body, juries hesitate. Without a body, defense lawyers plant seeds of doubt. History shows how dangerous this gap can be. There have been infamous no-body cases where suspects walked free, their guilt suspected but never legally secured. Authorities in San Bernardino County know this, and it explains the relentless pressure to find Emmanuel. They cannot rely solely on circumstantial evidence if they want a conviction that will endure appeals and scrutiny. They need the one thing that remains missing, the small body of a child who deserved to grow up. And so the haunting continues. Rebecca sits in jail, repeating her story of a parking lot attack. Jake faces the weight of his criminal past alongside this new, horrific charge. Neighbors whisper, strangers mourn, detectives dig, and still, Emmanuel is nowhere. Each day that passes makes recovery harder. Each day that passes erodes hope a little further. The candles outside the Harrow home are not just symbols of grief, they are symbols of demand. The community demands the truth. They demand that Emmanuel be found. They demand justice that does not leave the central question unanswered. Because until Emmanuel's body is located, until investigators can point to a resting place and say this is where he is, the case will feel like a wound that refuses to close. For now, the haunting remains. Investigators believe Emmanuel is gone. The evidence points to death, not kidnapping. But the body is missing. And so, with every passing hour, with every headline, the community, the courts, and the entire nation are forced to sit with the same agonizing question. A question that may echo for years if it is never answered. Where is Emmanuel Haro?